I've had my share of totally screwed up, weird relationships. And today, but I talk about one of those. Um, when I was a teenager, started dating this guy. This guy and I had nothing in common, except for superficial things. He came from a relatively normal home. He was a very devout Christian. I was an atheist who came from a very dysfunctional home. His parents bought him cars, not a car, but cars when he got his driver's license. My parents didn't. We didn't have the money for that kind of thing. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He had never used drugs. And he had decided that he was not willing to lose his virginity until he was married. I had some sexual contact with people. I hadn't actually had sexual intercourse yet, but I'd had sexual, contact with people. I had same-sex relationships. I had same-sex sexual contact. I, was sexually free. I masturbated. I was very open about sex. I smoked. I drank. I had, on occasion, used recreational drugs. I had smoked pot at that point in my time. It was at the point in my life. I had tripped shrooms at that point in my life. They weren't things that I still did, but they were things that I had done. These are experiences that I had had. And actually, I take that back. I had sexual intercourse at that time because I was 17. Anyway, we dated. And boy, was that a big mistake. I learned a lot about myself in this relationship because this is probably the only person that I ever dated that my father approved of. However, he did not approve of my father. I don't know. It was just. I remember the day that I tried to convince him. I was the dysfunctional person in this relationship, by far. However, his, history, the things that he had been taught about, sex, gave him some sexual hang-ups. I remember the day that I convinced him to, have oral sex, which I prefaced with, it's not really sex, it's not intercourse, so it doesn't count. Of course, it does count if you want it to count. It doesn't have to count if you don't want it to count. Like, that's a personal decision that each, person should make on their own. But I did manipulate him into, attempting oral sex. But in the middle of it, he burst into tears. It kind of gave me that. Sorry, puppies. That shaped the way that I think about sex. Because, on the one hand, every hormone in his body was telling him to give in to this. He wanted to give in to this. He wanted to have sex. And yet, the thought of sex caused him such intense shame and guilt that it made him, actually cry. And there's nothing wrong with a guy crying. I'm not making fun of his reaction, although I did at the time, and I'm ashamed of myself for that. But his reaction was slightly abnormal. It was so guilt-ridden, and I don't think sex should be guilt-ridden. Um, if one of us deserves to feel guilty for that encounter, it was me for trying to pressure him into having sex. Um, but our relationship was just, it's very functional because we were on two completely different levels. I was older than him, but I was barely older than him. We were only 1 year different in school. We started dating when I was a junior, and he was a sophomore, but we were on completely different levels. He had not experienced anything, really, in life. He didn't come from an abusive home. He didn't have that experience to shape him. His life was very functional, and for lack of a better term, his life was very vanilla. The most outrageous thing that he did to upset his parents was listen to rock music, and even then, what is it, Fawn? Even then, he listens to, edited versions of rock music. Even though prom was chaperoned, he wasn't allowed to take me to my junior prom without, also having an additional chaperone. We were driven to my junior prom by a teacher because I would not have been allowed to drive him, even though he had a driver's license. He was not allowed to drive himself. It was odd. It was strange. It was very weird. But ultimately, this relationship did not. Ultimately, it ended up having a lot of problems. I had an ex who had experienced these things. He did smoke, and he did drink, and he had used drugs. He currently, at that time, and I'm pretty sure still now, smoked marijuana. And although that relationship was also dysfunctional, we had more in common, and I didn't feel guilt or judgment the way I felt with the other guy. The Christian, there was always that guilt. There was always that suspicion of, well, if I'm not having sex with you, are you having sex with someone else? And this is coming from him towards me because I was the one who had sex, and granted, I didn't want to have sex, but he assumed, that because I had sex, that I would want to continue to have sex to the point that I would cheat on him. I had friends who smoked cigarettes, and anytime that I, smelled of cigarettes, then I must have been smoking a cigarette. A little party with friends, and then, a party that he wouldn't go to because there would be drinking. And then later he would be like, well, you had to have been drinking. Like, then why would you go to the party? And while we were together, I did try to abstain from these things, and I did very well for a while. And we dated for a while. In high school terms, we dated for a while. And it was very dysfunctional. I think it set the stage for me to allow myself to be questioned by others. Because I did allow him to question my every move. And like I said, I was dysfunctional. I was at times out of control during this period, but it is what it is. And just thinking about the way that shaped me, because I did allow him. I felt so much guilt over my past, which was in large part due to the fact that I felt completely worthless. At this point, I had already been raped. I had already been sexually molested. I was being beaten at home. I always felt like I was second and secondary to whoever my father happens to be having sex with at the moment. Um, it was very uncomfortable and odd, and so all of that guilt and all of that, negative emotion that I was focusing on myself because of my past, and he amplified that. And I think I became used to that amplification of my past and how it had affected me. In return, I projected all of that onto him with, well, you've got to be a loser because you don't do these things. You're not acting like a normal teenager. You're goody goody two shoes. I'm not really entirely sure why I started dating him. I think I was just bored. And that's offensive to him, I'm sure, and it should be. You shouldn't date someone just because you're bored. But I think that was why. I think I was bored. I had just broken up with the person that at that time I considered to be the love of my life. I was stupid. I was 17. He's not the love of my life. And here's this guy, and he's cute enough, and he likes the same kind of music. And I think there was also a feeling that because there was so much, not actual religion, but like religiosity surrounding my life. Everyone that was in my family identified as a Christian. My father had just married this woman who was uber religious. I mean, to the point that she tried to use the Bible to get my father to disown my brother and I. That woman needs some professional help. But yeah, it was strange. So I think all of that kind of helped mold me and make me think that even though I was an atheist, that being with someone who was so moral, because it had been taught to me that morality came from religion, would make me a better person, because I didn't like who I was at all. So, and it's really sad the way that everything ended, because I broke up with him. I tried to break up with him in a very manipulative way. I had a huge crush on his friend, who was younger than him, and I knew that it was inappropriate for me to have a crush on this guy because he was 2 years younger than me. And with me being 17, that made him 15, and it was inappropriate. And even though, like, I was friends with this guy, it seemed inappropriate to date him. So instead of, also, I thought that I would be rejected by this young man. Come to find out, I would not have been rejected by this young man. Come to find out, he had a crush on me, and we ended up dating later in life. But that probably would have been a healthy relationship at the time. Really would have. Oh well. Instead of being honest with him and telling him that I didn't feel the same way about him anymore, and that really I never had, I pretended to be attempting to cheat on him with the guy that I did like, brother, because the brother was my age. So he seemed like a more appropriate person to have a crush on. And so, in a wonderful display of self-destructive behavior, I started leaving this person like love notes. And I didn't have any feelings for this person whatsoever. I didn't like him. I thought he was shady. I thought he was an idiot. I thought he was basically just a degenerate. I didn't like him. I thought he was a bad guy. We had nothing in common. But he seemed more age appropriate, so I pretended. Also, I knew that that wouldn't be reciprocated. Therefore, I wouldn't end up having to date this person. So I pretended to have a crush on him. But that didn't work because the boyfriend feels like he forgave me. It seemed like no matter how much I pressured him, no matter how much I belittled him or spoke condescendingly towards him or even pretended to cheat on him, that he wouldn't break up with me. And I couldn't bring myself to break up with him. I figured that breaking up with him, I just couldn't do it. Because I would be alone by my own volition, and it seemed like something that you just didn't do. I'm pretty sure that I learned that from my dad, because my dad is not very good at being alone. But anyway, when that didn't work, I did eventually just break up with him and started dating my ex-boyfriend, which was a complete disaster and didn't last very long. It's odd though, because we did attempt to stay friends for a while, and then I went to Alabama. When I came back from Alabama, he hated me. And he never did tell me why. I'm pretty sure that he finally came to terms with the fact that I treated him like shit. So I did. Kind of mutual though. Maybe it wasn't mutual. Maybe I was just projecting all that judgment onto him, and maybe it wasn't even really his judgment. Maybe it was my own judgment about, my behaviors. I don't know. But it was dysfunctional. It was weird. I sometimes tell the story to my husband in a much more expansive, longer version with all the details filled in. And he's like, why would you date that guy? You must have really hated yourself to date that guy. And not that there's anything wrong with that guy, it's just that he was so far removed from a person that I would date, healthy or not. And it wasn't healthy. It was very just weird. It was a weird, weird relationship. But I actually heard about him a couple of years ago. Actually, about 10 years ago, I heard that he was still a virgin, still refusing to have sex, sticking to his principles, which is admirable. But that he was in college and that pretty much everyone in his dorm hated him because he, ratted them out when they drank or, took part in risky behavior, which is kind of part of the college experience. But I don't know. I wonder how he's doing now. I often wonder how people are doing now. I wonder how he's doing now. I wonder if he made anything of himself. I wonder if he got married. There was a theory among all of our friends back then that he was actually gay. And if that's true, then I hope he had the strength to come out of the closet. Because it's lonely in the closet. I know. Anyway, so that's it for today. I'm going to go attempt to walk my puppies in the rain, but it's raining, and so that might not happen, because 2 of the dogs refuse to go out in the rain. But anyway, so that's it for today. I shall be back tomorrow. Don't know what I'm going to talk about. Never do.